Good evening. I don't usually do this, vlogging, but my wife, to my friend, shout out to Aaron Moore, the TinyHawk S as a learner. The problem is, it has a built-in FrSky receiver. So my goal was to get this to work with this, and I didn't have any full-speed DSMX micro receivers laying around, but from my switchover I had a pile of SPM 4648s lying around. I soldered one up in here, and it instant brownout. It drove the voltage on the 3v3 rail right down to about just under a volt, and I suspect that maybe that rail actually supplies voltage to the built-in receiver, and maybe it's not designed to handle the additional current of a second receiver. So, not having any other 5-volt receivers for Spektrum laying around, I decided to try to make what I had work. And I'm hoping to be able to share this little hack with you. You may find yourself in a similar situation where you don't have a 5-volt receiver laying around, or for whatever reason your 3v3 volt rail on a flight controller is burnt up and you don't want to replace it. So let's get down to it, shall we? The things you're going to need for today's endeavor include a penknife, Phillips screwdriver, fine tipped, some solder, some double-sided tape or electrical tape would work, tweezer, needle nose pliers, side cutters, soldering iron, solder wiper, some helping hands, some wire, your decased and depinned SPM 4648, the drone, and lastly 2 of these small Zener diodes. So the first step here, we're going to take a fine tipped Phillips screwdriver, and we're going to remove the battery holder. These 4 screws will also free up the flight controller. I have to work that off a little bit, and we see that our flight controller is now exposed. So swing that around, and that should come right out just like that. We're going to grab a tweezer or needle nose plier, and very carefully we're going to grab the edges of your motor harnesses, and we're just going to pull those right free. My big fat hand's in your way. All 4 are free now. And that will give us the clearance we need to get to the camera wire. And we're going to disconnect that as well. So the pads we're looking for specifically, you can see here, there is UART 2 on the back side here, and then the 5 volt and ground for UART 1 are over on this end here, and they're pretty clearly marked on the board itself. The reason why we're not using RX1 is because I believe RX1 is for S-Bus, which is an inverted protocol, and Spektrum never got down with that nonsense. Alright, I hope that this angle will work better so you're not just looking at my fat fingers. We're getting all of our tools ready. And the first thing we're going to do, if you haven't decased one of these before, it's 2 screws and some double-sided tape on the back, which you can just peel off or use a razor knife to just cut through that. But here are our wires. We're just gonna pull this guy off, and we're gonna take this guy, and it should slide. If you wiggle it a bit, it should slide free of the pins. It might take a bit of force, but it will come off. That can go right to the garbage as well. And then depinning. Nice. I actually might need that. We're going to hook that up right there. Have a tweezer ready. I'll actually use a tweezer for this one. Put everything into your view. What's going on? The camera's moving. And then apply enough heat to loosen up that pin. One, two, and 3. There we go. We're only removing those to give us the clearance we need to get between the flight controller and the VTX. It's very tight in there. So those have been removed, and the guys we're actually going for are down here on the edge. These formerly sat beneath the connector, and so we're reversing this polarity, or this wire arrangement, because if you look underneath, you're going to see that ground remains in the center, but you can trace, and I've checked this with the multimeter, you can trace the former signal pin to this pad over here, and the power pin you can actually trace to this pad on this end. You grab about 1.5 to 2 inches of wire, and you're going to strip one end off of each of them. Wipe your iron. And we're going to tin them. That'll make soldering much easier. You're going to place, if you remember your wire order, it was signal first. We're going to do power first. And if you can do so, if you left yourself enough wire on the end there, enough bare wire, and you just use your thumbnail to kind of hook it around that pad, and it should stay. Just kidding. Get that back into the helping hands. Add a little bit of heat, a little bit of solder, and just make a nice little blob there. You should be pretty well covered. That's not going anywhere. Repeat with your ground and your signal wire. And that leaves you a nice, compact little solder job there. The next step is to assemble your diodes. I think these particular diodes very small. I think they're Zener diodes, which means they have a breakdown voltage of something like 17 volts when reverse biased, which is well beyond our range. We care about forward biasing. What we're going to do with that is we're going to, when forward biased, a Zener diode drops about between 0.7 and 0.8 volts in a circuit. And forward biasing means that you put them in positive, positive, negative, negative in the circuit. So you're going to take two of them, you're going to twist their legs together so that there's a black band which denotes the negative leg on that. The black band should meet with no black band. I'm grabbing a different helping hand here because these are a little tighter, but you have your Zener diodes in series. We're just going to put them right there. Apply a little bit of heat, just kiss it with the solder there. Makes a tight little package. We're just going to nip the tip here. No idea where that went. There you go. while we're here, we're actually going to cut these legs really short, so we don't need them to be long. Just cut our power lead off, save that for later, you're going to need it. Strip a little bit of the red wire and silver it. Your black bands, you want them to be facing downstream on our circuit, positive to negative. We're just going to add a little bit of solder, just enough to make it stick. It's pretty firm. It doesn't have to withstand much. There isn't going to be a whole lot of pressure there. We're going to get the other end of the wire, strip and tin it. We're going to solder that to this end here. Give it a tug, make sure it's solid. And we're going to slip our 2mm shrink tube over that and shrink that sucker down. Another step here, get some really thin tape. I like to do this, especially when we're sandwiching components. We're just gonna cover up all that copper. You got your solder blobs covered up, and you got the pads covered up on the bottom side. Swing your antennas around the right side of the receiver, and you're going to tuck that beneath the VTX. It's a tight fit. May take a little bit of work. But there it is. The old receiver antenna, you can actually cut that off or desolder it and dispose of it in any way you feel like. But since I have access to both protocols, I'm actually going to leave it in this build. I'm just going to tuck it under here so that it stays out of the way. I don't think it will actually hurt anything. Certainly doesn't weigh that much. Just like that. The yellow lead being our signal, we're just going to swing that around back here and solder that to the RX2 pad. Remember to wipe. If you flick a blob of solder somewhere to the middle of this board, you will be sorry. Apply a little bit of heat and that should stick right to it. On the other side, we have our Zener diode package and our red wire. Strip that loose, cut it to length, strip it loose, tin it, and then route it. going anywhere. And same with the ground pad. At this point, I just want to take my multimeter, put it in the continuity mode. We're just going to make sure that I didn't bridge anything. And we have silence. We're good. Now while we have it out, we can plug in a battery. What we're looking for, there we are, blinking orange light you can see here. That's on the receiver. The receiver is receiving power. I'll take this moment to bind up the receiver and come back later. Okay, now that I've got my channels set up and my receiver bound, we're ready to rock and roll. So, just as we had taken apart, we shall put it back together. Make sure that the controller orientation is maintained. Real simple. You see the USB port, that lines up with the hole in the back of the canopy, and the camera port on the front lines up with the camera wire. And now we're going to line this FPV antenna up so that it will slip through the hole in the canopy behind the camera, as you can see, terribly because I have the lights turned off like a dumb fuck. Be right back. I hope that helps a little. As you can see, our antenna is sticking out the top there. I didn't like it being tucked inside of the canopy like that. And we just slip the nipples back in there. You may need to plug your motor wires back in if you intend to fly this when you're done with this little endeavor. There we go. Try lining our nipples up again. And we're going to line the nipples on the battery holder up. And they should snap into place nice and easy like. So that that'll stay in put. And grab your tiny little screws. And there we go. Now these antennas, I like to slip them through these holes back here because, reasons. And the nicest thing about that is this setup twists the wires just about perfectly. So that they are offset 90 degrees to one another. Imagine that. Make sure they're tucked in nice. Take some handy dandy E6000. Oh, it's a little dry. Zip ties, not just for keeping things together. We're just going to add a little dab right in here. And that will keep that sucker from pulling out and flopping all over, getting caught in the props. Give that time to dry. And there we have it. One TinyHawk S for Team Failsafe.